Yes.
All right, great. So the first thing, we're about to log in. The interesting thing, this is actually running on my machine. So first of all, this can run anywhere. It can run on Windows, Linux, it can run on your cloud, etc. So we're not abandoning on-prem. So wherever it makes sense to run in your organization is where you'll be able to run it. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and we're going to take a look at the UI. This just happens to be the home dashboard. We customize it for the webinar, but you can customize it in many different ways to put, different graphics, charts, you name it, etc. So one of the first things that I wanted to start with, one of the challenges I found when working with some other data catalogs was explaining what it did to the larger organization, right? A lot of people would talk about, all right, here's the Snowflake world or Tableau world, but it really lacked a 60,000-foot view of what was going on. So if I go ahead and take a look at a feature that we call the architecture diagram, this is really the one place where you can look to see all of the different systems that we've cataloged, all of the different data integration processes, and all of the governance processes we put on top of here as well. So you'd be able to explain it to a C-level or to the data architect team, or maybe you're trying to get a new team to give you their metadata. This shows us a grand view of the world, exactly what's going on in a large organization. All right, so this helps you envision everything. But there's a lot of people who, they live in their, finance department, or they're only using Databricks, and, maybe they don't care about a lot of these things on the screen. One of the nice features we have is called configurations. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our Databricks architecture, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at that same architecture diagram. All right, so now we see a much simpler view, right? We see that there's a staging data warehouse populated by a DI tool that goes into Databricks, and there's only one BI tool, in this case, Tableau, hanging off of it. So, a lot of analysts, this is their world, Databricks and Tableau. They don't need to be overwhelmed with metadata about systems they don't have access to or know. So there's a lot of different usage for this configuration feature. So the first thing I want to point out, this is all on one server and one instance. You don't have to set up 3 different instances of the software to accomplish this. This can also be used to help you do dev and prod testing as well. No need to set up 2 servers. And a very unique thing is you can use it to time travel between versions. So let's say you're looking at some BI reports and they used to be correct, and now some of the end users are complaining about the numbers, and you want to know what's changed. You might have a version for the year end. So you can actually go ahead, take a look at these 2 different versions, and compare the differences in a graphical place as well. So it could tell you, all right, we changed this column, or this connection was deleted. So, and also the last use case is there's a lot of things that are shared across the entire enterprise, things like a glossary, right? So even if you're in the finance team or the sales team, you might not care about the entire enterprise architecture, but this allows you to segregate things like glossaries. And it's also great if your company's doing acquisitions and you want to keep metadata separate. So there's a lot of use cases for this. We call this configuration. So I just wanted to go ahead and start there. So I'm going to go back to our master configuration. So we're talking about, beyond data cataloging, but we're going to spend 5 minutes showing you the basics of data cataloging, really searching, metadata curation as well. So here we're back to the home page. So we could go ahead and start typing, and you'll notice as I type, it brings up everything related to customer. So we have an advanced search, you could filter on it, etc. But here I can see that I want to go to my customer table. All right. And when I'm looking at the customer table, you're going to see all of the basic metadata you would expect. You can see documentation about the, terms and definitions. We are able to do data sampling. If your security policies allow for that, we can bring in data samples. We can do data profiling to tell you more about your data, etc. Another really interesting thing here, I can see there's a couple of open Jira tickets on here. So I've seen, Jira integration, some other tools, but it's really a one-way. This would allow me to come in here, and if I saw 60 open Jira tickets on this table, I might want to, think twice before using this, or figure out why there's so many questions about it as well, right? You'll also notice that we have all the social curation that people expect in a catalog. So you can put different sensitivity labels on it. I can go ahead and certify things. I can warn and endorse things, etc. So all of the typical data cataloging you would expect, documentation, curation, etc. All right. Now I'm going to take a look at a few advanced topics, some things I haven't seen in other catalogs. So the first thing is when I click on relations, the tool automatically builds an ER diagram for you. All right. There's nothing extra I had to do based on the metadata between primary and foreign keys. It's going to build out this ER diagram for me. Right. This diagram is super useful for, more technical people to, understand what's going on here. Like a lot of people, this is their primary language. So we have robust capabilities around ER diagrams. This one we created on the fly based on the metadata that we ingested. We can also import your external ER diagrams. Most large companies have a library of those they want to reuse. And there's a lot of other features you can do in here. You can come in here, and if you have a large picture, you can color code things. You can go ahead and zoom in and out on tables. You can add new entities, etc. So full ER diagramming capability that a lot of data management people expect and have worked with in the past. Another great advanced feature is bringing in things like business process models, all right? So, people using data at your organization is not new. It's very likely that there's been some processes modeled out before. So what happens when a new customer gets onboarded? What happens when we add a new user to a BI tool? So if I go ahead and check on the customer invoice business process model, right? This can either, once again, be created in the tool or imported from something you already had. This one, we went ahead and imported from the existing customer, and it can be as complex as needed. The big thing, though, is these are really not valuable till they're tied to the data. So anytime you see the little data icon, we can go ahead and click on there, and that will bring us back to the customer table that was really used in that business process model, right? So once again, full capabilities around business process modeling, not something that's available in every catalog, but very good to get, business and IT on the same page and show people how they actually really use data. All right. The next thing we're going to go ahead and jump to. So in this example, we're thinking about changing the customer table because we had some requests, if we looked at those JIRA tickets to add some columns. So the first thing I want to do is see, is this going to impact my BI reports? I know that there's probably a lot of reports based on this, but I want to be sure. So I can go ahead and click on related reports. All right. And this shows me, in this case, there's 37 reports that are going to be impacted. So we definitely want to put some time and thought into this. This also gives you a good idea of how many different BI systems we support. So you can see things like Tableau, Business Objects, Cognos, ClickSense, even Excel, right? If you look on our YouTube channel, we've recently launched Excel Lineage. That's a very powerful and unique feature as well. So here I can see all the different reports that will be impacted. But now if I'm a BI user, I may not live in the data catalog. I may spend all my time in Power BI. So that's where I would want to use this information. So anytime you see this Open With tool, you can go to any one of these reports. And if I click on Open, this brings me right directly into the BI world. And the important thing is we support, about 8 or 9 BI tools. So you could do this in Power BI. You can do this in Tableau. You could do it in things like Snowflake or Databricks. You could do it in JIRA, Informatica Cloud. So we're always adding new ways to bring the catalog to end users, because one of John's trends was really making sure that you can surface this where people live, because usually the largest number of data users is on the BI side, right? They may not be super technical, but you may have 2,000 users at a company, and you want to make sure they can see the information. So let's say I am one of those BI users. I spend most of my time in Power BI. If I want to know more about this report now, I can click on our browser extension. All right. And let me just refresh it there. So when I click on the browser extension, it brings the catalog directly into Power BI in this case. All right. So, we started our demo in MetaKarta, but I could have started from this Power BI report. It looks a little odd because there's only 2 customers. I would have expected to see a lot more in here. So I can go ahead and expand this. And this brings me directly from my BI tool to everything that I see in the catalog. All right. And specifically in this case, we can see the very in-depth Power BI lineage, right? Because databases have a common structure with rows and columns, but every BI tool is very, very different. And because of our OEM nature with several of them, we're usually able to build, you know, the deepest, most robust metadata around BI tools as well, because it's all very separate and distinct as well, right? So that shows you a real quick example of just coming from Power BI and clicking the browser extension to bring you back into the catalog. And once again, we support, you know, over a dozen places where that can happen. All right, I'll go ahead and close that out. So now we can see that this is going to impact a lot of our BI reports. But what we really want to spend some time on is the lineage. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the lineage. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit for the webinar so we can see a little bit more. So the first thing that we do is we always want to make this lineage diagram readable and usable, right? There's no sense in presenting you with, you know, thousands of nodes of spaghetti, right? We want to make sure that you can go ahead and read it and give you a lot of choices to drill into what you want to do. So right now, even though we're showing you a high-level view, this is pretty complicated lineage. You know, it's coming from a data lake on S3 into a staging data warehouse. It's flowing both into a Snowflake cloud data warehouse as well as an on-prem data warehouse. And you can see that it's populating, you know, 6 or 7 BI tools and Excel reports as well. All right, so a very complex lineage diagram, but made very digestible. So what we want to do is now give you some additional ways to explore this. So the first thing I can do is we always get column level lineage, right? That's our basic, you know, standard of lineage. So if I want to see the columns as well, let me just make this a little bigger for the, we can go ahead and see all the column information here. If you click on the column itself, the blue line will highlight the direct lineage as well. So even though there's a lot going on, it's very easy to follow with the eye. All right, we get a lot of good feedback on the UI presentation. You'll also notice now that it's a little bigger that we're going to inherit a lot of the classifications and curation that you do. So if I hover above some of these things here, I can see that, you know, last name was PII. I can see things were marked as good quality or confidential. And if it's a direct passing, that'll flow from, you know, your data lake to your source all the way to your BI tool, right? So you can go ahead and expand it to see the columns. If you just want to look at a smaller view, right now the depth is full. So I'm looking at all stages of the lineage. But if I just want to work my way and figure out what might change, if I change the depth to 1, we're only seeing 1 step in front and 1 step behind, right? A lot easier to digest. I can export this diagram and send it to somebody, but it brings you a very easy way to look at the lineage. All right, so this shows you a lot of the options. Some of the other options we're not going to dive into today is a topic called control lineage, control flow lineage. So besides the direct passes that you see here in blue, a lot of times other columns can be used in calculations and factor into the lineage. We call that control flow. We'd be able to show you that as well. All right. So this is a very simple to digest lineage view with a lot of different options. What I'm going to show next is behind the scenes, we're tracking the more complex, you know, processes as well. So if I go ahead and I click on my customer ID in a table, I can go ahead and see all of the processes down at the bottom that would use this. So let me go ahead and change this back to full. That down. All right, and go back to my customer ID. All right, so now when I take a look at it, you'll see there's a lot more processes that I've explained it. So on the right-hand side are all the BI processes. So every time that it was pulled into, in this case, Tableau or ClickSense or Power BI, you can dig into that. On the left-hand side is we see the ETL process that loaded it. So this is an example of more complex lineage. So we're going to take a look at that now. So when I show the lineage details there, right, this is where we're going to get the eye chart, right? So this is what we're doing in this case is we're taking a very, normalized table and moving it into our data warehouse. So there's a lot of steps in here, all right? What this lineage could be most helpful for is helping the ETL developer debug what's in here. So instead of looking at the internal data flow view, we could look at the transformation data flow, and now they can see exactly which step they need to work on, right? So whether you're using, Informatica Power Center or Talend, this gives you an idea of the complex lineage that we can look at as well, right? And on the other side of the coin, if you want to see how we treat all BI tools very differently, or even Excel, it's probably a good time to take a look there. You can see everything that's populated down here. So let's say I want to go ahead and look at a BI example. We can see all of the different Power BI nomenclature in there as well. So we'll be able to give you lineage on the BI side as well. All right. So that's about a 5-minute deep dive into lineage. We show you how we can look at different processes. You can toggle back and forth from column level lineage, etc., to get the most complete view. And just remember, this is done, on all types of lineage. We're looking at ETL tools. We're looking at code. We're looking at, stored procedures inside the database, and we're looking at the BI transformations as well, right? Because you want to have the most complete lineage diagram as possible, right? So that's a few minutes on the advanced lineage. Got about 10 minutes left in the demo. So we're going to move on to a few other advanced topics, right? The next thing is when people are cataloging data, there's vast amounts of data out there. You want to be able to automate things quickly. One of the features that is found in some catalog that a lot of people are beginning to look for is data classification, right? So data classification is taking a look at the data and figuring out, is it sensitive? Do we need to protect it to more data? So we do a great job on this as well. We don't think you'd have to go out and, look at a separate solution for data classification. So we do data classification in many ways. We can do it metadata driven. So if your goal is to have no actual data in the catalog for security reasons, we can do, a regex expression on a social security number. So there's a lot of ways to do that. So we call that metadata driven. That's super flexible. Then where you're allowed, we could also look at the data, right? So we can look inside file systems, we can look inside databases. So a great example of this is our very own product ID here. So we can also learn from the data. So rather than us having to put in a regex expression, this is actually going to go look at the data, and this tells us the format of our product code, right? So we can see that it's, letter, dash, letter, and 3 numbers as well. You can also have tremendous flexibility on saying, when should we consider this a match? Because something like Social Security, if you see 1% in there, you still want to look at it. But maybe in the product ID, we can deal with, 10% matches being off. So you can set all the different thresholds. Another great example. So we have thousands of these classifications, over our time in the OEM business. Another great example of how this is more powerful than just classifying the data is our example on Social Security number. All right. So this is the most common example from data classification vendors. So we're going in and, we're looking for a pattern, right? Pretty simple in the Social Security world on US. We could have also learned it if it was, a different country's identification number. But here's our social. The important thing here, though, is that when we found this Social Security number, we can also go ahead and associate this to a term, right? Because really what people do is they want to go ahead and, make different groups out of their classifications. So most people usually start with PII, and you're going to see things like name and age and sex and Social Security number. So this Social Security term is going to roll up to PII, and then that PII information may roll up to a higher standard like GDPR. So if we go ahead and take a look at the term that we created, so I'm going to go ahead and search on US Social. All right, so here's our US Social Security number. All right, we could go ahead and see all the detailed here, all the rich metadata. But what we want to focus in on is the data lineage of this, all right? Or really the semantic lineage, because this isn't data in this case. Here we can see that we found our Social Security number. but it also tells us that rolls up to our PII classifiers, which roll up to our GDPR classifiers. And then lastly, it shows us that this social is showing up in at least 4 places in our data lake that we need to keep track of, and it's marked them as PII as well. All right. So if you have a data classification project, it's very important that it's tied directly to the catalog, because we could go in and start with your data lakes and classify things. And if your data lakes flow into a staging area, into a cloud data warehouse, you get a lot of that classification for free because we're going to infer that. If it's a direct pass through from your data lake to the staging area to Databricks, you'll be able to see that classification. So doing classification at the source with a tool like this, when you have lineage and things connected, makes it very easy to catalog a very broad estate of data as well. All right. And the last thing I wanted to go ahead and finish on is the idea of, we try to account for everything in the catalog. We've built in a lot of functionality between ER diagrams and BPM diagrams, but we're never going to be able to account for everything out of the box. So the last thing is talking about the extensible metadata model. All right. There's always new types of data structures out there. So we want to make this as easy to extend as possible. So one of the really powerful things about this is not only do we make it very easy for you to extend, let's say you had a table and you want to add some more attributes to it. Very easy to do here in the first column. Let's say you want to create a brand new object type, like an AI use case. You can go ahead and add that in the middle. Or lastly, if you want to create something very complex, right? In our example, we were looking at code set management, right? Most organizations have, industry-specific codes. So rather than just put that in a file as reference data, you want to be able to relate that to things. So we could model that out. And if you take a look at show diagram, it shows you the actual model there as well, right? So this is very robust. But what's even more important than having this flexibility, this also automatically creates the UI for you, right? There's nothing extra you have to do. You create this new model type, it creates the UI, and it creates all the import-export mechanisms as well, right? So now it's a first-class object. You can either go in the UI and start adding, data to it, or you can go ahead and bulk load it as well. So anytime you come across the need to model something else out, we're not only going to allow you to do that quickly and easily in the tool, but it's also going to create the UI and all of the integration points that you need as well.